brought to you with the kind support of Federated Hermes Inc., a leading global investment manager. Guided by their conviction that responsible investing is the best way to create wealth over the long term, their investment solutions span equity, fixed income, alternative and private markets, multi-asset and liquidity strategies, and a range of separately managed accounts distributed through intermediaries worldwide. Our next guest has always bridged the gap. Find out how he is now taking this to a fintech company in Kenya. I'm Aoife Devitt, and welcome to the 50 Faces podcast, a podcast committed to revealing the richness and diversity of the world of investment by focusing on its people and their stories. I'm joined today by John Robinson, who's Chief Executive Officer at Bridge Capital Advisors, a firm he founded in mid-2021. He previously was Chief Executive Officer at Consequent Capital Management and a board member of Mifugo Hela, a fintech company based in Kenya. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about your career. And so let's start off with where you grew up, what you studied, and how you came to enter the world of investing.
Sure. Well, thank you. I grew up in Long Island in New York. And to me, there was an interesting childhood growing up. My grandparents owned a restaurant and other several businesses. My mother was a financial analyst at a defense contractor. And a lot of my friends' parents worked in the city at financial institutions. So I always grew up in an environment of finance and also investment. So it only intrigued my interest in it and my passion and love for it. So that's how I really got started in something that to today I still love finance, love numbers, and love businesses.
So you knew that from an early stage. Did you then go into that in college already?
Yes, I did. I attended Indiana University of Pennsylvania from undergrad in finance and also business school, went to Kennesaw State University. And it was always going to get my MBA and also how to increase what I'm doing from a leadership standpoint. So that was something that was very important to me, going to school, furthering my education, but also understanding a lot of different industries and understanding how finance and treasury or investments are interwoven into all those different things.
And how did you gain the practical experience then across the different angles, I suppose, of finance? Because you've certainly blended a lot of them throughout your career.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate from that standpoint where I went through the sales and trading program at Kidder Peabody. So it gave me a good idea of what I wanted to do from a debt perspective. I also did some internships at other family offices or registered investment advisors from the equity side of things. So it gave me a good opportunity to really round myself as I was growing up and going through college and getting out of college and starting out my business career. I've been very fortunate to work on a lot of different sides, from the investment banking side to the underwriting side to the investment management side of things, and also being on the other side of the table, working in city government, working on different boards from an investment standpoint. So I always say that I've been on both sides of the balance sheet, which has given me an opportunity to kind of round what I've done. And also there's also a sales side in there too. So I've been very fortunate in a career to be able to do those things and take a lot of the things that I've done and meld it together. And I think that's what you have to do, is be able to provide value in a lot of different areas in today's marketplace.
And I want to talk about your thought process in setting up your own firm and how that came about, and maybe a little bit about the experience of setting up, because we all know it's not the easiest endeavor.
Yeah, setting up my own firm is just something, as I stated, I grew up in a business environment. So my parents and grandparents said the ultimate goal is always to have your own firm or be able to manage a company from that standpoint. So I wanted to continue to do what I wanted to do was take the experience I had here in the U.S. and also the experience I have overseas. For the past 11 years, I spent a lot of time in the African continent talking to investment managers, talking to plan sponsors from that standpoint, and governments and sovereign wealth funds looking at that. So I wanted to create a firm that be able to, and that's the name of our firm, bridge the gap between what's happening here in the U.S. and what's happening in the African continent, and be able to look at two-way investments from that standpoint. So it's been, I can say it's been interesting really starting up that firm, my firm that I have now. My thing is here, and like I said, I stated about 10 years ago, is education from here to U.S. investors, what is happening outside the U.S., and open up people's eyes and really to see that the growth opportunities that are over in Africa or Africa, the opportunities here, and create that two-way flow. I think we're starting to see some change over that over the last 4 or 5 years from that standpoint, but just bridging both opportunities. And that's where education comes into it and really trying to create a firm that creates solutions or specialize in those things where there is opportunities on both sides of things.
And I'd love to know whether there's any kind of lesson you took from your grandparents' business. You mentioned they own restaurants. I mean, that is known as being one of the toughest lifestyles, I suppose. Rewarding, but very, very tough. Did you
Yes,
take anything from that to your own firm?
yes, I laugh and I laugh from that perspective. Growing up and like I said, I went through training programs and worked in the city of institutions, and younger people always complained about I'm working 80 hours a week or 85 hours. Well, that's a normal thing when you're running a restaurant, from that standpoint. And also being able to see all the different facets, understanding all the different pieces from either selling to customers or buying supplies or financing, all those things work together. And to me, that's part of that DNA and having to work all the time and really look at things that I have to do and really putting my best foot forward to do those things and having to work twice as hard to get where we need to be. And that's one of the greatest things I learned from my grandparents' business. You have to work hard. You have to really put your nose to the grindstone, and you have to be aggressive and never give up on what you're trying to achieve. That's part of my DNA now, is never getting up, working twice as hard and trying to be the best that you can be out there, and you can achieve whatever you want to do. There's never anything that's not impossible. You have to find a way to work around it and get to it and to achieve your goal and to keep on moving forward.
And of course, in a restaurant, you want repeat customers, right? So it is a relationship business too. And clearly in Bridge, you're building relationships and generating leads. What's your approach to that, and what kind of a long-term time frame do you put on that? Because these things can take time.
Yeah, I think any business that's, it's interesting that working as I started working on a sales and trading desk, that's a transactional business. The business that from either being an investment banker or being a investment advisor, that's a relationship business. So that's something that always is going to take 2 to 3 years to really gel. But that's the thing, is you have to be able to understand that you have to create that relationship. You have to create that level of trust, and you have to be prepared to solve problems or different mandates that clients are looking for, and be able to always be able to be that first call. I have a thing that I always want to be the first call for a client, regardless of what it is, on either side of the balance sheet, even though my business is on one side. Hey, I know you have experience on the other side. Tell me what you think. And from that standpoint. So from a relationship standpoint, always trying to be the first call no matter what. And I think that's where you have to move to when you're in a relationship business.
And I want to talk now about innovation, because that's obviously where you're going to see a lot of interest at the margin. And maybe you've got some insights into that from some of the fintech work that you're doing in Africa. Can you talk about what excites you right now and maybe what that fintech experience has taught you?
Yeah, I think no matter, and the thing is, as I create my firm, or even as you going through my background, providing solutions is very high, but you need to provide solutions by being innovative and looking at things a little bit differently, and not be a cookie cutter or looking outside of the box. And I think that's what clients are looking for. And I think that's important. And also, if you look at Africa, I think it's something that, like I said, I've been working in it for some time. You have to think outside the box and looking how things can be 10, 15 years down the road, and how that innovative structure or something that's different. One of the things when I look at Africa, I look at agriculture and and I look at finance. they may have had phones and everything else from that standpoint, but bringing the tech side of things is to help bridge a gap over there that is needed and help move things forward from a social standpoint, but also from a educational standpoint, but also for helping families grow financially and everything else. So, and I think that's the biggest thing is, and also a big thing in Africa too is relationships. My thing is people always look at things, well, this is transaction driven. No, it's not. Dealing with other countries or outside of the US, yes, we have relationships here, but that's really important over there. So dealing with, the fintech company and spending time in Africa really helps you understand about developing relationships and also being innovative and creating and developing a solution that fits into people's criteria.
And you're at the coalface there with a fintech company. Do you think that we outside Africa, the average investor, has any grasp of the extent of the technological innovation? I've heard, for example, that Kenya is the mobile payment capital of the world. That's going back years now, even. Do you think that the outside investor has a grasp of the innovation and also has the right perception around the risk and reward of investing in Africa?
Well, I think that is changing. If we look at last year in the whole continent of Africa, there was roughly around $5 billion put into startups, fintech startups. So we see that changing, and that's been happening over a period of time. But also using technology to go into specific areas, like I stated, in agriculture, that could be farming, it can be poultry, it could be all these different things that are out there, and also into growing different crops or things. And I think that's where we don't see that here in the US, but we know there's progress and really understanding the size of transactions too is different. You may have transactions here that are much bigger in size, $1 billion, but in Africa, as they're trying to grow and evolve, those transactions may be a smaller size. So you have to decide from a business standpoint, are you in it for the long haul, or it's just a transaction standpoint, or it's developing a relationship in the continent and the different businesses and everything else? So I think there still needs to be some level of education and understanding the marketplace and understanding the different niches and segments of the marketplace, but also understanding too, it's not just one continent. There's over 50 countries in that continent where things are different, and being able to work that into your strategic business plan and say, hey, this is going to be something that's going to take a little bit of time, and we need to mold to what we're doing if we really want to be active in this marketplace and being able to grow a business over there.
And that's an area that you have a board role. I'd just like to ask you about some of the board roles you have and what it is that you seek to bring to those board roles. What do you think makes an effective director?
I think what makes an effective director be able to bring something a little bit different, a different view of things. We understand the missions, but how can that mission be expanded, and how can we help those different boards or foundations or endowments or companies grow using my experience either from the investment side or the investment banking side or just running a business. And I think that's what a good board member can bring to the table is a vast amount of experience in a lot of different areas. And I think that's why when you talk about board diversity, it's not just diversity from people, but a diversity from people working in different industries, looking at things differently from a marketing side, from a strategic partnership side, all those different things. And that's what I try to bring to the table is, okay, this is what our goal is, but let's look at it from this side, or this is maybe opinion how we think looking different, and not just looking at it from, okay, this is the mission, let's just get going at, but how we're really going to grow this business, or at the same time, how we're going to grow this foundation, and how are we going to reach a lot of different people, and really focus on the mission in some different areas, and to really increase the trajectory of what we're trying to achieve.
Staying on the topic of diversity, let's talk about the industry itself, because you've been in it for some time. Have you seen an improvement in terms of the diversity in the investment industry?
I think we've seen some improvements. I still think we have a long way to go. And I think, that sometimes it's very difficult because firms need opportunities, people need opportunities and everything else. And I think sometimes people forget all the time that every company, every firm started out with the first dollar and the first client. So we all started from the same point, but not using that against, you know what I mean, new firms or new people and everything else, and really looking outside of the box and really looking at, you don't want to have groupthink all the time, but be able to expand it. And I think our industry needs to, it's moving in the right direction, but maybe it needs to move a little bit more rapidly from that standpoint. And also the industry needs to really focus on those things and put a lot of effort into those things. I think there's effort, but guided, targeted effort on what we're trying to do. And not just say that we're doing something, but really your heart has to be into it to affect change from a diversity standpoint, and really taking that and making that part of your mission statement within your company too.
And just going back to your starting your business, and we mentioned earlier in our pre-chat that you did start it right, I think, around the time that COVID started to upset our daily lives. Maybe looking at that and any other kind of challenges or setbacks you faced throughout your career, have there been any that you can learn from, that you've learned lessons from?
And I think there are key words that we talk about. Sit back. You said keywords, setbacks, challenges, or you can say wrong direction. But the one thing that I want to make sure that people, it's not failure. Failure never comes into that. Is how do I learn from these challenges? Starting up the business as we're coming out of COVID, yes, it's very difficult. But I saw an opportunity. I see an opportunity to go into a space where there's maybe a lack of diversity in different spaces, from an outsourced CIO standpoint, or or how do we really work with consultants or investment managers to really increase their diversity with managers. And I think it's very important when you see an opportunity or you see where there may be lack of representation. And that's the way I looked at it and say, well, this is maybe not the greatest time, but you see it and you want to go into it. And that's why I decided to go into it aggressively, to kind of fill that void, because there has to be a voice in those particular sectors or strategies and everything else if we're going to really create some change, effect some change in the industry itself. So yes, timing is always, and I think in our business, timing is always essential. But my thing is, if you have a vision and you have a goal that you want to achieve, time needs to come out of it, and you need to, you know what I mean, and say, I need to go after this aggressively. So even though there may be setbacks, there may be challenges, or things are not going as rapidly as you want to, keeping to the plan and understanding where your core goals are and saying, I'm going to achieve those things no matter what. This goes back to me growing up, putting the time in and trying to be the best out of all of that.
And you are very well known and very well liked in the industry, and I think you probably are a role model to many. Have there been mentors in your life or key people in your life that you've looked to for guidance?
Yeah, and there's been several people. My first job, you can say in a financial institution, was at a large Japanese bank. And to me, that's really compelling from my standpoint, whereas you're working with people of a different culture, a different way of looking at things. My manager there said something that sticks to me today. It said, the object, John, is not just to find the answer to the first the first problem or create the first solution, is to look and be able to answer the next 5 problems or create a solution for the next 5 things that may happen down the road, and also be able to look forward into those things. So that's something that I try to do, is like, okay, we may have solved this, but let's look down the road, or what are the next things or the next situations that may come up, or the next challenges that may come up, and also have an answer for those things. And also the next person was a manager when I worked at really went through the training program at another investment bank. And it's an interesting story. I worked there for about 6 months, and it was bonus time. And so, you go in, everybody goes in the back, you get your bonus and everything else. And so I'm not going to mention I got my bonus. And he looked at me and said, why do you have a frown on your face? I'm like, well, I was expecting a little bit more from that standpoint. And it wasn't a bad bonus whatsoever. And from that standpoint, he said, well, John, let's think about this a little bit. It's not that you don't deserve it. We always want to give you, always get what you deserve and what you think your value is. But also look at the rest of the world too, and people that are not in the seat that you are or don't have the same opportunity from that standpoint. And the thing you say, well, let's go back to you graduate from high school. How many people in high school are going to get the same type of bonus? This could be their year's salary from that standpoint. So I think that was something that really opened my eyes up and said, you need to sit back and think about, you know what I mean? The opportunity that you have and really step back and really take this in. And I don't want to use it, but, not to be arrogant or anything from that standpoint, but give you some humility and how blessed you are to be in that position. And that's what I take from everything that I do in life. And I'm also doing business too. You have to do it with humility. Take your time and do it that way and look from a bigger point of things and not just from a monetary standpoint.
And would you say that's a creed or a motto that you live by, that creed of humility and looking out for others? Or is there any other word of wisdom maybe that you've learned, whether through your personal or your professional encounters?
Yeah, I think that is, and being able to, that is something that's very important to me, is sit back and say, okay, how do I help others achieve different things? And that's one of the things that I've, for the past, 20 years working with underserved managers from that standpoint, trying to find opportunities for them and really open people's eyes to that. But at the same time, from my standpoint, is that's something that we can always do some good. We can do good and also make a living at it too. And being aggressive from that standpoint and working harder than anybody else. So I think that's all those things work together and how I view things and what do I want to achieve in life and how I run my business or my personal life too.
And it seems like you had things certainly quite well together, even as a young man. You mentioned your interest in finance and business. But if you had any advice for your younger self, anything that the decades of working in the industry have taught you, is there anything that you know now that you wish you had known then?
Yeah, one of the things is, and if I had some advice myself, take advantage of the global opportunities and not just be isolated on one area of the world. Even though I worked at different places from an international standpoint, but take advantage, be able to go out there, step out there and learn different cultures. I'm doing now and spending time in the continent over the last few years. Maybe I could have done that earlier in my career from that standpoint and everything else. So I think that's where taking advantage of the opportunities and go after it aggressively from that standpoint. And I think that's an advice that I would definitely give my younger self.
And it does take intention, doesn't it? Going after that global experience. It's not always easy, especially not in the current times. And it's sometimes the road less traveled is much more challenging than we'd like it to be. But I completely agree with that. Well, thank you so much, John. You used the word humility, but that was something I'd written in my notes to use in the sum up, because really your warmth and your humility really are striking. And I think it's for the good reason that you are known to be giving a voice to many less represented groups in the finance world and bringing those to our attention and ventilating those ideas. And that is a very powerful gift. So thank you so much for coming here and for sharing your insights with us.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I want to say this is a great digital story venue that you've created, to hear some of the stories, to give people encouragement and to really understanding our business and people in our business. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I thank you what you've created out there and everything else. So it's a great testament.
Well, thank you for your support. I'm Aoife Devitt. Thank you for listening to the 50 Faces podcast. If you liked what you heard and would like to tune in to hear more inspiring investors and their personal journeys, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice, and all views are personal and should not be attributed to the organizations and affiliations of the host or any guest.